Daredevil on Netflix. It's coming very, very soon, and we thought that before the show comes out, we would take this one final chance that we have, not really knowing that much about it, to dream, to project, and hope about what we think the show is going to be in the long run. Yes, obviously, right now it's just one season, and then Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, and the Defenders, but sorry about this, folks. I've got to be selfish about this. Fuck those shows. Well, what we're talking about right now is Daredevil the way we want it multiple seasons down the line, because there is so much to do with this character, you can't possibly do it in one season. So we're going to talk about the dream perfect scenario that we want to unfold. Now, before we do that, what we do have to deal with is obviously the show as it exists in its first season, what we're getting right now, what we can glean from the stills, from the articles, from the interviews, and from the trailer. And so far, I gotta tell you, Spencer, I don't think they've put a foot wrong. I like everything that I'm seeing. Would you agree with that?
99% agree. Everything I've seen, I'm like, okay, I get it. This is the Daredevil that can exist in the MCU, and this is the kind of, not necessarily adult-oriented, but a little more hardcore comic book that I'm used to reading and I want to see, that I don't think has quite been nailed in terms of a film or a television adaptation. But the thing that gives me pause, and it's only one thing, was in a recent interview, Stephen DeKnight, the executive producer and showrunner for the series, was talking about how Daredevil won't be the one that creates his own costume. And I believe he was referring to the red one, not the one that we've seen in all the photos. And his quote was that Daredevil wouldn't be making it, someone else would make it for him, because he never understood how Daredevil was able to stitch it together and tell the difference between the colors of the fabric. Now, if you've read Daredevil, you know that his radar sense is so finely tuned that he can touch a piece of fabric and tell what color it is. To me, that's literally the only misstep I've heard about Daredevil, and that's it. I wouldn't say that it's a huge misstep, but it's definitely something that makes you scratch your head and wonder, like you read Daredevil before you signed on to do this, right?
Right. Please, you're the one in charge. You do start to panic about it. Well, I understand where we're coming from. To me, it's never been about the costume. I mean, I'm definitely curious, and I feel that one of the things that always, actually in retrospect, confused me about the movie. Now, I like the movie, like I've said many, many times. If you're a long listener to this show, you could bring out a Phil G action figure and it would say one of 5 phrases, one of which would be, the Daredevil movie got me reading Daredevil comics, because I've said it so many times. But one of the things that did thoroughly confuse me about that movie, and I know that it's not really the filmmaker's fault, but the suit, man, the costume, it was it was all over the place. Like, you see it on the poster, and it looks like, okay, that's the suit from the comics, pretty much. And then you see it in the movie, and it's more like a red leather biker's jacket with a mask. Yeah. And then also we found out, of course, in some sequences, like the action sequences in the bar where he's trashing up the bar, it is grey. It's not red. You think it's a lighting effect that it looks that way, but no, it was actually grey because the studio was so terrified of using the colour red because Spider-Man had been the movie that came out just before it. All this kind of crazy crap. So I assume that Marvel is going to do what Marvel does best, which is to not worry about the subtleties of adapting a comic book costume for the real world. They're just going to do it, you know. It's going to literally be their costume, and I think it's going to work. But what I've heard so far about Season 1 is, I think, exactly what it needed to be. It was really the presentation that they did at the New York Comic Con when they first had the crew and cast panel, and the first footage shown, that I really got behind it, because I thought, okay, what do I want from Season 1? Well, I don't want them to dilute it with basically the entire history of Daredevil comics. I want Elektra nowhere fucking near this show, not because I don't love her, but because she does not need to be here. I do not want I don't want Bullseye, really, because I want them to, invest in those other villains that Daredevil has. He doesn't have that many, but he does have some good villains. I want to see those first. What I really want to see is the full Daredevil origin story, told fully, told properly. I want them to use Foggy Nelson properly and develop that history. I want Karen Page brought in properly, and I want them to develop that history with her. I want them to develop the origin and rise to power of the Kingpin, but since it's an origin story for him, you need to bring in another villain just for the colour and variety of it. They're doing that. It's a Kingpin origin story, but we're also getting the Owl, who... That's the Daredevil villain to pick. If you're not going to have Bullseye in the show, you pick the Owl. They picked the Owl. And also, they have Vanessa, the Kingpin's wife, who is such a vitally important character in all the stories. So the fact that they're actually bringing in all of those characters into Season 1 makes me realise that, man, they've got it. This is exactly what I wanted to hear. And on top of that, I'm also very partial not just to Frank Miller's book, The Man Without Fear, which was the definitive Daredevil origin story, but also another take that was done on it back in 2001, I believe, by Jeff Loeb, who is now running the TV division of Marvel, called Daredevil Yellow, which was a slightly lighter book. Daredevil's not known in comic books for its lightness of tone, but what this was specifically how Matt and Foggy, just starting their law practice, got to know and meet their plucky secretary, Karen Page, the woman that Matt fell head over heels in love with. And it's an episodic jaunt, and they meet the Owl, who wants Murdoch and Nelson to represent him as a client. That don't work out, and Karen, of course, gets kidnapped by a villain called the Purple Man, and all this kind of stuff happens. And of course, hence the title, he's wearing the yellow suit, which really fits the lightness of the story, because it's really a kind of a sort of a romantic comedy, really, but it provides... I thought you could bring elements of Daredevil Yellow into it, because that would give you... It would give you basically the lightness of touch that's needed in Matt's life, because this is a guy who's, he's going to have a pretty dark origin. He's going to need something in his later life. Now, in the movie, they had the right idea, and that's what Electra was going to represent, and here... they're going to have Karen to fill that void. It also seems that they're bringing in Karen into the story in a very exciting and dramatic way, that she's basically, you can tell from one of the stills in the trailer, yes, I've analysed it, that she's going to be implicated in a murder, or she's hovering over a dead body. She's in the wrong place at the wrong time, and as we understand it, that murder is somehow linked to the Kingpin. So I think initially she's brought in to Nelson and Murdoch's world because she needs a lawyer, and they're just up-and-coming lawyers, and they need a good case. So they pick up Karen's case, and that's as good a reason to bring her in and introduce her as any. It just feels like they're doing all the right things. I'm pretty excited about it. I just feel like, by the end of this, the Kingpin's going to have become the Kingpin and built his empire. He will have proven himself to have a slight chink in his armour in the fact that he has Vanessa as his wife, this morally ambiguous at times woman, but someone who actually just seemed to be a fully formed human being, not a monster. Daredevil will be fully established. He will have had one of many exciting, colourful battles with the Owl, played by Bob Gunn. Nelson and Murdoch will be fully established because they'll won the big case to prove Karen Page's innocence, and Karen and Matt will presumably be in a relationship that will not last very long because Matt's never does, and it seems like that's 13 hours right there. Oh, and not to mention, we haven't even talked about this yet, fucking Scott Glenn is Stick. I even know he was in it, and then he just shows up as a flash frame in the trailer. Stick, for those of you who don't know, is Matt's trainer when you know, again, if you've only seen the movie, you'd think he does it all by himself. He just finds a couple of rooftops and, you know, thanks to some Ben Affleck narration, he's Daredevil as a kid even. But no, he gets a mentor in Stick, who is he's such a cool character, but he's such a prick too, especially to Matt as a little kid, but he teaches him everything he needs to know going forward. So that was my little rant there. I mean, am I right here? Or does that sound about right? Am I pretty?
Oh, yeah, like if that's how it all plays out, that will be a very satisfying first season of the series. There's a part of me that still kind of likes the 2003 movie. They get a lot of shit wrong, but there are some things that they get right. And like I've said in the past, Daredevil is one of my favorite superheroes, and I just want to see something with him in it that nails the character like the Richard Donner Superman or the Dark Knight or Iron Man. I want to see that for Daredevil, and please just answer my prayers, Phil.
Well, I was going to say, I have one. You had that one slight misgiving about the costume. I had one slight misgiving about that trailer. I hate the cliche of the priest confessional.
Yeah.
I hate it. And it just feels like such an obvious, lazy way to talk about Matt's Catholicism, because this is an integral part of the character, folks. You know, he is one of the few characters in all of Comicton that is really defined by his faith. He's a devout Catholic and yet dresses up as a devil. But there's so many different ways to do it. I mean, first of all, the whole priest confessional thing, that was done in the movie. And that's one thing you don't want to remind people of. I mean, I thought it was fun in the movie, and it is what it is, but it's just wrong. You know, forgive me, Father, for I've sinned. That's pulling it mildly, 007. You know, we've seen that. You know, I don't want to see it. Besides which, I mean, the obvious and you don't have to do this in the first season. I'd have misgivings if they were going to do this, because it feels like that's one layer we don't need right now. But of course, Matt has a mother. His mother left him when he was very young and became a nun, and she was working in the church just down the street, and he never knew it. And he finds out much later in another story, which we'll talk about a little bit. But if you're going to talk about Matt's faith, you're going to do it in a better way than that. So I really, really hope I'm just blowing this tiny little thing out of proportion. I don't know what you feel about that.
I imagine it's going to end up being just one sequence. It's such an important aspect of his character, though, that it's something that they can't. I'd be shocked if it wasn't mentioned, at least in passing, in every episode. But I hope it's not all framed around the confessional sort of thing, because that's such a tired trope.
Daredevil epilogue. So this week,
like if it's the last scene of the final episode, that might bother me a little bit. But if it's like just kind of thrown in some random episode, I can get over that.
Right, well, that's season 1. We're feeling good. We're feeling confident. And by the way, not to dismiss the other shows that are happening, I understand why they're doing it. And I understand that it's a good idea. I mean, Luke Cage is an important character in Matt Murdock's life. He's shown up in plenty of the stories. There was a time when he even became Daredevil while Matt was in prison. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Oh gosh, that might happen. You never know. We're getting ahead of ourselves. And Jessica Jones and Iron Fist. And of course, with Iron Fist, then you start getting into ninjas. And one of the big villains of Daredevil stories, when they brought in the character of Elektra, ninja assassin, was the Hand. And you imagine that Iron Fist will introduce the Hand, and they will be his premier villains. And you imagine that Iron Fist, the show, will also introduce Electra very teasingly, and then that. And I don't know what's going to happen with the Defenders. I have no concept of that at all. But that would, you would think, Iron Fist in the Hand and a teasing glimpse of Elektra would swing us very nicely into season 2 of Daredevil, which must be the Elektra saga. There is.
Well, and don't forget, just to add, the Jessica Jones show is introducing Purple Man as its primary villain, who is a Daredevil villain. But he interacts with all 4 of those characters in a good way, or at least 3 of them.
Oh, that's great. Anyway, so Elektra Saga has to be season 2. See, what happens, folks, is once you've got a hit, once people love the show, and once you've firmly established it in a way that people aren't thinking in any way about the movie, they've let all those preconceptions go, and now they're treating the show as the show. Think of it very much in the same way that, Buffy the Vampire Slayer eventually became just a show, not a show based off a movie. Think of it in those kind of terms. So when we get into season 2, that's when you can start reintroducing those elements that we're introduced in the movie. This time we can get the definitive Elektra story, and this time we can get the definitive Bullseye. And I loved Colin Farrell, but Bullseye, you can do some... Bullseye, they cast the right guy. Bullseye's going to walk away with this show, and he's going to be the character that everybody loves, and it's going to be great. And now we've got a fully established Kingpin, and really, I'll tell you where I'm coming to this, Spencer, and then you tell me what you think. But the reason that I was... I've had different opinions about the movie over the years, but after I read the Elektra saga, what resonated with it for me was something that the movie did completely differently, because the movie's a boy meets girl story, and it's sort of how she becomes Elektra and stuff. But what the Elektra saga was in the comics was about Matt's first love when he was in college, when he was a teenager, and this wonderful, exotic, wild woman that we'd all love to, entered into his life and made an impression, because your first love is never or rarely your last love, but you never forget it. But he had a painful experience with Elektra, her father died, she left, he was just literally just abandoned. It was almost like a puppy love kind of thing, because he was young and, naive, and he was in a vulnerable place, and it took him a long time to get over Elektra. And then, just at the point that he has forgotten about her, then she comes back into his life as a ninja assassin that does not recognize him initially, but then, as they encounter each other over many, many violent situations, eventually the ice starts to break a tiny, tiny bit. And yeah, it's not the traditional love story that you would imagine. The whole way I'm reading this Elektra saga, I'm waiting for the conversion moment. I'm waiting for the moment where, he goes to her apartment and she breaks down, and they have that conversation and they say, hey, we'll work this out together. We will fix this. We will take on the bad guys together. It never happens. She goes further and further down the dark path, and eventually she replaces Bullseye as the Kingpin's chief assassin and accepts a contract to assassinate Matt's partner, Foggy Nelson. But before she can pull it off, Bullseye kills her so he can get back his title. And it's such a wonderful, unconventional story, clearly written by Frank Miller, a man who has no love in his heart. That's no concept of cliche love stories, and that's what made him the perfect guy to tell it. There's a reason why it's a saga, folks. It works. It's not my personal favourite story, but it is the most well known. And 13 episodes of that easily. You don't need the Owl, you don't need Stiltman, you don't need Purple Man. Maybe a little bit of the Hand, I don't mind, but just have Kingpin, have Elektra, have Bullseye, and have Karen leave the show very, very early in that season for reasons which we'll explain when we talk about season 3. They have a breakup, and that's it, and that's why it's so important that Elektra comes in, and you can't have Karen in there in the mix as well. That just complicates it too much, and they didn't do that in the books. So have Karen leave season 2 very, very early. She'll be back later. Just have it as Elektra. Am I on the right track with this one?
Oh, definitely. That's better than the season 2 I wrote down on my notes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have given you a chance first. I do apologise.
No, not at all.
No, what was your idea, though? We all want to hear it.
My idea was, since season 1 is all about the rise of Daredevil and the Kingpin, is that season 2 would be about the Owl going off on his own and becoming a rival for the Kingpin, so that it's Matt as Daredevil, fully established in his role as a neighborhood lawyer and also the neighborhood superhero, but then these two warring factions that are about to rip apart his neighborhood of the Kingpin and the Owl. So that was my idea. But I like yours better.
No, that's fine. I mean, hey, 13 episodes, you can do a lot in 13 episodes. You can have it as a special. Christmas special! We'll do that. We'll do that as a Christmas special with the Owl.
That's a great idea. Daredevil Christmas special.
with special guests B. Arthur and Jefferson Starship. Yes, absolutely. Well, folks, season 3. Now, of course, we complete the Miller-Lovin trilogy, as it were, because season 3, of course, must be the all-time classic Daredevil story, Born Again. And this is about something that has been escalating and brewing for a long, long time. This is about two characters who we've been following on polar opposite paths, Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. And they're both on a path to destroy each other, but Kingpin's just never had the weapon to do it. And again, this is one of the genius parts of Miller's writing, is that he's able to take something so simple and so, even at the time, overused, the reveal of the secret identity, but have the angle be something so utterly unexpected, especially for the time. In this particular case, Karen Page has moved to Hollywood to be an actress, to be a star. As we meet her in the story, she is... She's in a bit of trouble. She's a wastrel, she's a drug addict, she's a prostitute, and she is hopelessly addicted. And so, because she has no money, she sells the only thing that she has left of value in order for a quick fix: the true identity of Daredevil. And immediately, what I'd love about that is that if they spend the whole of season 1 making us fall in love with Karen Page, which is obviously, if you don't, I guess the show doesn't really work, so I really hope that they do.
Well, and with Deborah Ann Woll playing Karen Page, that won't be hard.
The signs are good, I will agree with that, but at the same time, in the opening minutes of season 3, you see something like that, immediately after all they've been through and however many times Matt's going to save her ass in the show, and then in 5 minutes of season 3, she just sells him out just like that. True enough, she's not even thinking straight, but still, the audience would turn on her, and then for the rest of the season, they're going to have to, start earn respect back. The character's going to have to earn our respect back, much the same as for Matt. So, with that information in hand, and it's one of my favourite bits of the Kingpin. He's on a yacht, and he gets the information because of the way his infrastructure works. This is Kingpin at the height of his powers. He has, this cellular structure where basically one guy passes it to one guy, who passes it to another guy, who passes it to 12 other guys, who then pass it to the Kingpin on his yacht. The Kingpin gets the information and says, kill anyone who's touched this envelope, and they all get terminated. And then he says, now I will test the information. And he starts in a very, very effective way that really, really, ties into all our paranoia and fears. He breaks down and destroys Matt Murdock's life in the most wonderful, relatable way. The banks start foreclosing on Matt. He owes payments to the banks that, as far as he knew, he didn't. But all of a sudden, his accounts are frozen. He literally can't do anything. His law practice is being sued, I believe. His law practice gets blown up shortly thereafter. He can't keep his apartment. Not that he had a fancy apartment to begin with, but very soon he is reduced to that kind of place that Tom Hanks lives in Big. When he first goes to New York, it's that kind of place, and then very shortly after that to the slums. And there's a wonderful visual trick in the issues that every one of the opens, it starts with Matt in the fetal position, either in a comfy bed initially, but then in a slum apartment, then in the streets, and then eventually in the church, where his mother is a nun who rescues him when he's at his lowest ebb, literally brought down to nothing. And the revelation, in a very, very subtle way, that he's finally found his mother, which is one of the moments which I love most in all Daredevil history, which is, when you bring a character down to nothing like that, which it so brilliantly does, and then you give the character just that tiniest gleam of hope, that tiniest gleam of, hey, it's going to be alright, and the audience gets a breather from the unrelenting horror of what's happening in our hero's life. It's just wonderful. And what's best of all about that story is he's barely in the costume. It's not about that. It's really not about that at all. It's about a man, not about a superhero, and yet everyone agrees it's the best Daredevil story of all time. And by the end of it, I've never been a fan of the ending so much because it goes really comic booky. It involves a team up with Captain America. That ain't going to happen in the show. And they fight this terrorist called Nuke, who's this steroid pumped up, Arnold clone. And just because they managed to find out that Nuke was hired by the Kingpin and he's caused several $1 million worth of real estate damage in this action climax, the Kingpin gets exposed. Not fully as a criminal mastermind, but certainly his public reputation is destroyed. I'm picturing something a lot more dramatic here, where not that he dies, but he is exposed as the Kingpin and he has to retire. He has to go away, and he leaves New York. Or almost for good at the end of season 3, and Daredevil does get back together with Karen. She does redeem herself, and at the end, life is good. We get a happy ending. If the show ended there, you would be happy. I've got other plans, but still, it would be a good way to. It would be a good way if you thought of it as a trilogy. That would be a good way to end it. Daredevil Born Again. Again, 13 episodes, easy. You happy with that, Spencer?
Oh, definitely. I think in that description of what you want to see, you've encapsulated why Daredevil is such a great character and does things that can't be done in any of the other Marvel movies. Is that when things get down for Matt Murdock, he very seldom is able to get back up. He gets knocked down even further than he was before. And that's what's so interesting, is that you can tell stories with Daredevil that you can't tell with Iron Man. Like, if Tony Stark loses his money, he's gonna get it back. And going to Captain America, he loses Bucky, his best friend. Bucky comes back, he's bad, but then Bucky's good again. So that's why Daredevil works. And when you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, man, the Coen brothers are never going to make a superhero movie, but if they did, Daredevil would be perfect for their style of, holy shit, how can this get any worse?
No, that's right. That's absolutely right. Well, I think here's where opinions might start to veer off, because I haven't talked to Spencer about what I hoped for seasons 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Oh, let me say what my season 3 was.
Of course you are, yes.
Yes. So 2 was all about Kingpin versus Owl, and 3, in the wake of both of them kind of losing and Daredevil being triumphant, it would be about other sort of costumed villains making their way into Hell's Kitchen, and then the seeds of the Hand being planted and emerging in Hell's Kitchen. So you would see Stuntmaster, Stiltman, The Spot, all kind of sort of one-and-done episodes, and then peppered throughout them be preparing for the Hand, which would be the big hunk of the last couple of episodes, is Matt fighting off ninjas in New York, which is something that I just have to see before I die.
Now, you want full hand, like the hand of these ninja warriors, that when you kill them they turn into mist. They literally just dissolve and turn into mist, and it's all a bit crazy, and it blurs the lines somewhat between, is this supposed to be real? I mean, I was really believing the reality, and now you're bringing in melting ninjas. I don't know what's going on. So you want full on hand?
I think maybe if
but that sounded so weird. Full on. Sorry.
I think maybe if 1 or 2 of them did the mist trick, that would provide ample enough mystique about the group as a whole that you don't have to have every single one poof.
Well, okay. Season 4. Now we have been veering off so far, but I think we're really going to veer off here. We've not talked about this before, but I had an experience once with a Daredevil story. I started with the Elektra Saga, and then I read Born Again, and then I read a book which I started reading it on a train ride. It was I used to work very far away from home, and it was a 90-minute commute, so it gave me a lot of time to read my comic books. And this one thing, I had my 90-minute journey on the way to work. my 90-minute journey on the way back, and I devoured this whole book in one go, and I didn't regret it. It was one of the most gripping comics I've ever read, which was Daredevil, Guardian Devil, written by Kevin Smith. I fucking love this story, and it would please me so much if they made that season 4 of Daredevil. It's a slightly crazy story, folks, basically. I will not spoil a lot of it for you, but what we're dealing with in this particular situation, and why it would follow on so nicely from season 3, is that Karen is initially with Matt, but then they split up again. Karen has her reasons for it, which I will not dare spoil here. But, you know, she has a rough time of it. She's always had a rough time of it, as has Matt. Well, Matt's life gets a lot more complicated when a child, a baby, an infant, is basically dumped on his doorstep. And then a mysterious figure, this kind of clairvoyant chap, who knows the secret identity of Daredevil somehow, but also tells Matt Murdock, this child is the Antichrist, and you must destroy it, you must kill it. And then all of a sudden Matt starts going crazy, because everything that this clairvoyant predicts starts to happen. Everything starts coming true, and what initially seemed ridiculous starts in his own losing it mind start to make more sense. Maybe he's right. Maybe this child is the spawn of evil. I'm a devout Catholic. I have a devotion to not only uphold my faith, but also protect the weak and the innocent, do everything I do as a superhero. And how can I possibly let the Antichrist live? So it gets to a point where Matt is literally about to kill this baby. And we, as readers, start saying, I don't know if I can root for you anymore. You're losing it, man. Come back to us, Matt. Come back to us, Matt. Black Widow makes a cameo where, you know, she almost, you know, has to basically beat the shit out of Matt just to keep the child safe and snap him back to reality. And by the end of it, of course, as you would expect, many twists and turns. Things are not as they appear. This has all been a grand ruse, a grand scheme to trick Matt and make him self-destruct by a villain who I will not spoil the identity of. All I will say is that it wouldn't have seemed possible for this villain to show up in a Marvel Studios production a month ago. Now, it is possible. I'll also...
Perhaps we talked about him in the last episode.
Maybe. It's Jamie. But anyway, I mean, the whole point is that by the end of it, one character certainly is gone from the series forever. One of the reoccurring characters, and it's, you know, like Spencer was saying, these characters do not come back. And also, it's just a wonderful story that really gives you the opportunity to tackle just one aspect of this character, his faith. And I mean, that's what I'd like. I mean, you want to just touch on it briefly, which you would in the other seasons, fine. In season 4, tackle it head on, do Guardian Devil. And maybe it's not enough for a whole season of 13. Maybe we could do some other things. Spencer, what would you like to see, just that, or would you like some other things too?
I don't know what else you could put in there for a season 4 of Daredevil. I think that's a great idea.
Happy with that? Good.
But my only worry is that it's the kind of story that Marvel Entertainment would be like, can we do that? Like, can we do a story where he's like hunting this kid that he thinks is the Antichrist?
Well,
I'd love to see it. Don't know if it's something that they're even remotely considering.
But they did it though. I mean, they did do it. I mean, it'd just be the silliest logic of all. I'd just be holding a copy of the book and said, "You published this. It's yours. How could you say no?" And of course, obviously, you know, for people who aren't familiar with the show, you release a promo image and it's, you know, Daredevil with the baby, and you immediately go, "I'm out." No, you've thrown a fucking kid in this show. I'm not interested in. That's a risk that they would definitely. But that's what I'm interested in for season 4. Season 5. Now it's time to get into one of the most greatest comic tenures there's ever been, and one of the main influences on the show. And its tone, which you can see so clearly in the tone, in the style, in the mood, in the colour palette of just what we've seen in the trailer, which is the Bendis run of Daredevil. Now, we're talking about, I mean, this. I couldn't do this all in one commute on a train, but man, I couldn't put this one down either. This is where, again, we're talking about something very, very initially cliche, which is that Daredevil's true identity is revealed, but it's revealed to everybody. It's revealed in the newspapers, and then Bendis really gets into what does that mean for an average Joe, for a workaholic superhero who's really just a mortal man and who has a normal income. What does that mean? What are the long-running implications? He covers it all in this absolutely epic story. It starts with the apparent death and assassination of the Kingpin as rival gangs start to move in. By the way, I should point that out. I said Kingpin would be in exile by the end of Season 3. He would not be in Season 4 because there's no room for him and he doesn't need to be there. He'd be back for Season 5. Initially, he's moved out of the way. Maybe by the Owl, we could have that. And then he gradually climbs back up the power ranks. But all through this, it's really about a guy who... he's just getting... it's Matt Murdock, what can we say? He's just getting torn down again. We're just talking about a guy who now cannot... at least hide to anybody behind his anonymity, and it just takes its toll. And every relationship, I mean, as silly as it sounds, Foggy Nelson, his trusted best friend, his law partner, up until this moment, he didn't know. He had no idea what was going on, and now he does. And you can imagine how that affects their relationship. They've been through a lot together, but it's going to be severely tested. And then, not going to even get into what happens where maybe this is treading familiar ground, but it works so brilliantly. Matt meets another love of his life, Mila Donovan, a blind lady who he saves from getting hit by a truck, which is, mirrors the situation. Yeah, exactly. Mirrors the situation that happened with his own life when he was a kid, and he almost got hit by the radioactive waste. Well, he saves Mila, and again, with everything falling about him, he finds love and compassion, and gets together with a lady. And this is the thing where this is one of those stories where, everything seems like it's going to be alright, but it ends in the most unconventional way. This I will have to spoil so I can talk about Season 6, which is that eventually Daredevil... there's still a lot of debate throughout the run about, is he really? I mean, because it's wonderful because, there's no definitive proof. It's leaked in a newspaper article, but nobody really knows. The press hound Matt Murdock, but nobody can actually definitively prove it. No one has a shot of him putting on the suit. It seems self-evident that he is Daredevil, but there's no definitive concrete evidence. So the public's debating it and stuff, but the FBI, by the end of the run, definitely has proof. And he ends up in jail. But the Kingpin goes with him, and they both end up at Rikers Island, and that's how the show ends. That's how Season 5 will end, with both of these caged animals stuck in a close confinement space. What's going to happen next? That's how the comic ends. That's how the season's got to end. There's no doubt about it. And this is one of the reasons why, when they announced Daredevil as a show, we all slapped our heads, because when you read a run like that, you are reading a season of a show. I guess the only downside is there's maybe too much material in that to cover just one season, but heck, expand the run, make it 24 episodes rather than 13. I don't give a shit. Just do it, and do it well. Spencer?
Oh man, that would be such a heartbreaking cliffhanger to leave viewers on, but you're right, it's the perfect way to bookend the season. Especially, a lot of shows tend to wrap up around 5, and if you don't officially say, oh, Season 6 of Daredevil's coming out next, you just say, oh, here's the season finale, and then Daredevil's in prison. Yeah. I want this show to run as long as it can anyway, but it would be great if it ran long enough that we got to the material of him in prison. And that lends another thing to a type of story that Marvel hasn't told. I mean, they did it in the Hail to the King one shot, but that's not the same as having a hero in prison. which is a dynamic that you see pop up a lot in comic books, but hasn't really been explored in any, except Watchmen for, 10 minutes, but even then, you can't consider Rorschach a superhero.
No.
Yeah.
It's always from the perspective of, it might have been done before, I'm trying to remember, but it's always from the perspective of, I'm here because I want to be here.
Yeah.
You're all locked in here with me, all that kind of thing. So, it would be different. And of course, what a hook, because of course, Spencer knows, in the next run that happened in the comics after that, taken over by Ed Brubaker, which, I went into with skepticism because it was like, oh man, what a run. What a run. The next one's going to suck. It didn't. Brubaker's run was fantastic. It was as good a follow-up as you could possibly imagine, going in with realistic expectations that was not going to be as good as the Bendis run. And it starts, of course, with Matt getting out of prison. And who busts him out? Frank Castle, the Punisher. So if they're going to do a Punisher show, you could start it right there. You could kick off the character right there. Be totally happy with that. But in season 6, really, there's a lot going on. But the primary focus is, again, the most heartbreaking thing. Look, if you're a woman, just don't cross the other side of the street when you see Matt Murdock coming. Don't look in his eyes. Don't fall for him. Don't fall in love. He'll destroy your life. He won't mean to, but he will destroy your life, and that's exactly what happens to Mila Donovan. Their relationship's been tested by the fact that Matt's ended up in jail, but he's come back. And then, again, another villain comes up by the name of Mr. Fear, who delivers one of the most just heartbreaking, horrible, evil plans to destroy a character's life. Again, you're sensing a theme here. This happens a lot, but who the hell cares? In this particular case, he manages to turn Mila Donovan into at least a temporary clinical psychopath who accidentally murders a man and then ends up in a psych ward. And then Matt's all alone again. And that's cool. That's fun. So that happens, and that really defined Brubaker's run. And it just feels like if they really get it right, Daredevil's going to be a show that is defined in a lot of ways by its, not just its enjoyment, but it's like, man, I just want to slip my wrists after I watch this. It's like Game of Thrones in that way. You're not going to sit up off the couch after you've seen it. You're going to literally have to be picked up off the couch because someone's just punched you in the balls with the tragicness and the pathos of it all. And that's going to happen in season 6. And, as much I kept reading, but, it doesn't have a happy ending, really. They don't repair the damage. Mila's parents basically fight Matt for custody of her, and eventually Matt willingly signs a divorce with Mila. They do get married, and, he never sees her again, and he willingly does it so that she can basically have some kind of a life, because he knows that it's all his fault, even though it's not really his fault, but it is his fault. You get the idea. And again,
she may or may not appear in Mark Waid's Daredevil. Just saying. Did you mention like an antagonist for that season, or is it more of? Would you consider that more of like a character focused piece?
Well, it's, Mr. Fear, obviously,
Mr. Fear,
responsible for the Mila Donovan thing, but it could do with some more. I like the fact that you've built a rogues gallery. I'll happily see them all. I just want to make sure that the Spot is not responsible for Mila's...
Oh, no. But he needs to be in there.
Of course, absolutely, yeah. God damn you, Stilt Man! Damn you to hell! No, that's not. I don't see that. And then, of course, we've got season 7, which we've talked about before. It's End of Days. I'm going to let Spencer take this one, because Spencer got me reading it. Tell us about End of Days. Tell us about the book, and tell us whether this show and the last season should be a direct translation, or whether we should end with a little bit more hope, and then maybe a happy ending for this character.
Well, End of Days is... it's sort of the Dark Knight Returns of the Daredevil stories. It's the last Daredevil story in that in the very first issue, it's probably the first 4, 5, 6 pages, Daredevil dies. He gets killed in the streets in a fight with Bullseye, which, thinking about all of the seasons you just laid out, that's the only way Daredevil's gonna die. He's gonna die in a fight. He's not gonna die in his bed, surrounded by all the people that he loves, and a bright light comes out, and then he reaches out and goes to heaven. He's gonna die violently, brutally, and sad. It's gonna be tragic. And the entire series is framed around Ben Urich, the news reporter for the Daily Bugle, who will be in season 1 of the Daredevil Netflix series. And I don't recall if Ben is present for when Daredevil dies or if it's someone else that's there. But Daredevil says his dying breath, his last word, which is Mapone. And the whole series is about figuring out what that word means. And it takes Ben on a trip through this future Marvel universe where it's not future like 2099 future. It's an alternate future where Frank Castle is in prison and is like strapped to a chair so that he can't even move. So there's no risk of him escaping. And then Elektra has abandoned her ninja ways and is like a soccer mom, but is still fully aware, cognizant of everything she's did and has done, and is still a capable ninja if the occasion arose. And it's all about finding out what this word means, and then in the end we find out that Mapone was the child of Daredevil and Elektra, and Mapone takes on the mantle of Daredevil at the end. And I think it works. I think it could work as a season of a television show in that it really ends the story in a way that, okay, Matt Murdock's story himself was never going to end happily. But Daredevil as a hero and a character, there's that glimmer of hope where at the end you realize that Daredevil is still around. It may not be Matt under the hood, but it's someone. But I don't think that it could work as a direct translation. I think, and going back to something that you don't like, I think you need to utilize the flashback a little bit in that story, just because you can't have Charlie Cox be in the first episode only to kill him off. I think if you're going to have a Daredevil show, the guy that's been playing Daredevil for 6 seasons needs to still be in it a little bit. And in that way, you can enhance the story so that, sure, the mystery of Mapone is still at the center, but maybe you can clue the audience in a little bit more about the mystery, maybe add more questions that weren't even present in the original text by including flashbacks of what happened post-season 6, but before what we're seeing in End of Days.
That's what's going to define it, and it will have a positive ending. It just won't have a happy ending. There's a difference, but yeah, I'm absolutely fine with that. And it's going to be so interesting to just, for the general public who don't know what they're getting in for, to see how they react to that. Finales are always tricky. You love them or you hate them, and I know there's going to be people who, if we go with that ending, they're going to hate it. On principle, they're going to hate it, but that's all the better for it, as long as we can debate about it. And we us two here, we can tell you why it has to be that way, and it does have to be that way. As long as they kill Bullseye, as long as they give Bullseye the best death ever. I can't even remember, did they do that in End of Days? I don't think they do.
I'm pretty sure that they both die in that fight. I could be wrong. I haven't read it since it came out, which was like 2 or 3 years ago, maybe longer. I don't even remember. But I'm pretty sure that Bullseye dies. As an aside, Brian Michael Bendis, who wrote Daredevil End of Days, has already confirmed that a Punisher End of Days is coming eventually.
Oh my God. The blood's going to be on your fingertips, folks. That's going to be the bloodiest thing ever. Can't wait. Cannot wait for that. Right. Well, that's it, folks. I mean, hopefully you're a believer. I mean, I don't know, Spencer. I just feel like I am a grown man. I'm 30. Honestly, I know I don't act like it, but I am. I'm 31, and I don't act this way for anything these days. Like, if Star Wars sucks, it's not going to end my world. If Avengers Age of Ultron sucks, it's not going to end my world. I'm absolutely fine. I don't invest in these things anymore. I get excited about them, but I get excited when reviews come out and I start to really get into it. The only exception right now in my life is this thing. This thing has to work. It has to be great. But I just don't wonder if it can ever be as good as we have it in our heads, because it is one of those characters that means a lot to people, and it means different things to different people, and we've all got a different version of this show in our heads. We've just proven it right here, but I don't know. I do feel very personal about it. I do feel like I know it sounds so stupid and petulant, but I do feel like if they don't follow my run, I'm not going to like it. It's not my thing, you know. Because I just feel like it's laid out so perfectly, and it's just because the books gave that gift to me, and maybe too it was the order that I read them. I read Elektra Saga, and then I read Born Again, and then I read Guardian Devil, and I read the others after that and stuff, and it unfolded very naturally, and I could see the joins, and I could see how you could make that a real solid continuity in a show, and man, I just want it so much. But tell me, Spencer, should I just calm down a bit? I don't know. How are you feeling?
I'm with you in that, and it's what I do for a living that has done this to me, in that, if, like you said, if Star Wars sucks, I won't care. If Avengers sucks, I'll be disappointed, but I don't think it won't send my world crashing and burning down to the ground, but Daredevil, like you, Phil, we're brothers here, in that Daredevil means so much to me that if the Netflix series doesn't work, I'm going to be heartbroken, because it's different from the Avengers movies, not in that we've been waiting for Age of Ultron since the first Avengers came out. We've had 3 years of stories about who's going to be in it and what's going to happen, and then we've had posters and trailers and TV spots and set photos and official photos and magazine spread photos. But we haven't had all that with Daredevil, except for all our years of reading the comic and building it up in our head and what it means to us. And even then, when Avengers comes, it's going to be like 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 20. Daredevil is 13 hours worth of stuff. And if it's 13 hours of garbage, that's so much worse than 2.5 hours. Oh, this is something we haven't talked about. My boss and I have been talking internally about trying to get me one of these advanced copies of the first episode or first two, whatever they end up doing. What do you how do you feel about me getting that?
I knew that was the question you were trying to ask me. I feel very happy about it. Honestly, I do.
I love you, Phil, but I'm gonna watch it.
No, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. No, it's Daredevil is your guy. He's one of your top 3, and I feel it's only appropriate that you should abuse your power to get the jump on the rest of us. That's absolutely fine. Besides which, I mean, if you're in that position, you're also in the position to either tell me, dude, you had nothing to worry about, or dude, be afraid. Be very afraid. But I'm feeling very confident. I mean, I have to say, for me, the bit that really worked in the trailer for me was the bits where, it's the bit that the trailer really builds up to, is that he's walking down that corridor in that tenement block, and he puts his ear to the door, and we can't really hear it, but of course we as fans, we know the character and his powers at that point, so God only knows what he's hearing, and he's slightly hesitant. He knows it's a bad idea to go through that door. I'm going through that door, you know. And that's our guy. He's our hero. It doesn't matter what the hell's going on behind that door. It could be 20 guys raping a woman. It could be anything unbelievably seedy and grotesque, which it would be in Matt Murdock's world. I don't throw those terms around lightly. We're dealing with a situation. We're in Hell's Kitchen. That's where it takes place. And it works for me. It works for me completely. Oh man, Jesus, just don't fucking suck, okay? Just seriously, get the
That's
cost.
so much to ask, Marvel.
Really, I mean, come on, seriously. Okay, folks. Well, because it's true. I mean, what Spencer says. I mean, it's also the fact that if this fails, that's it. You know, he ain't showing up again. It's not like Hulk where they can say, oh, okay, that movie didn't do so well, we'll still put him in Avengers. It's not going to be like that for Daredevil. And it almost feels like it can't fail anyway, because it's like, you know, he's like the first foundation for something that they're building here. You know, it has to work so the other shows can work and be successful. So I don't think it can afford to fail, but I can't wait. I cannot wait. It's a month away, folks. We will cover it in some way. Still not sure how. It depends how. I don't know. Let's just watch the flipping thing first, however early we get it. We were going to talk about some other stuff, but, you know, as I kind of predicted as we were talking here, Daredevil easily filled up the show, so we won't. We will move on, but Spencer, there's no one else in the world I would rather talk about my favourite comic book character with. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm happy to have been a part of this.
I am too. You better...
Who's not happy ever.
No, you better send me a download link, you son of a bitch. Don't you rat out on me. Okay, folks, so we'll be back, same marveling at the time? Same marveling at the future. Oh, I fucked that up completely. Never mind. You know what? It's Daredevil, folks. I'm excited. We'll see you next time. Bye.